In the modern world, we are obsessed with the big break. We look for the singular moment of transformation, the heroic effort that changes everything, or the overnight success story that seems to defy the laws of physics. We are told that if we want to change our lives, we need to think big, take massive action, and revolutionize our entire existence in one fell swoop. But this focus on going big often leads to a cycle of intense effort followed by rapid burnout. We set ambitious New Year's resolutions to lose 50 pounds or learn a new language in a month, only to find ourselves back on the couch, discouraged and defeated, by the second week of February. What if the secret to lasting change wasn't found in the grand gestures, but in the microscopic details? This is the core premise of the journey we are about to embark upon. The reality is that our lives are not defined by the one-off decisions we make, but by the repetitive patterns we engage in every single day. These patterns, our habits, are the invisible architecture of our daily existence. They determine our health, our wealth, our productivity, and our overall happiness. In the following pages, we will explore the profound science of atomic habits. The term atomic refers to something that is both incredibly small and the fundamental building block of a larger system. By focusing on these tiny, seemingly insignificant behaviors, we can harness the power of compound interest to achieve results that are anything but small. You will learn that you don't need to reinvent yourself to see a massive shift in your reality. Instead, you need to understand the mechanics of human behavior and learn how to design a system that works with your biology rather than against it. We will move away from the idea that willpower is the only way to succeed and instead look at how environment, psychology, and small wins can create a life of effortless excellence. This is not just a guide on how to quit smoking or start running. It is a blueprint for building a system of continuous improvement that will serve you for the rest of your life. Before we dive into the specific strategies for change, it is essential to establish a high-level understanding of the themes that will guide this exploration. The central philosophy of this book is built on the idea that systems are more important than goals. While a goal provides a sense of direction, it is the system, the collection of habits and processes, that actually produces the results. If you focus solely on the finish line, you may never cross it. But if you focus on the quality of your stride, the finish line takes care of itself. We will explore 4 fundamental laws of behavior change: making it obvious, making it attractive, making it easy, and making it satisfying. These laws provide a framework for both building good habits and breaking bad ones. We will look at the neuroscience of desire, the importance of environmental cues, and the role of social identity in shaping who we become. Expect to encounter a mix of rigorous scientific research, historical anecdotes, and practical, actionable advice. We will look at the work of psychologists, neuroscientists, and even public health researchers to understand why we do what we do. By the end of this book, you will have a comprehensive toolkit for managing your behavior. You will understand that the tiny changes you make today are the seeds of a completely different future. The goal of this orientation is to shift your perspective from short-term fixes to long-term systems, setting the stage for a deep dive into the mechanics of the atomic habit. To understand the true power of small habits, we must first look at the mathematics of trajectory. Imagine for a moment that you are a pilot sitting in the cockpit of a large passenger jet on the tarmac at Los Angeles International Airport. Your flight plan is set for New York City. You have the coordinates entered, the engines are humming, and you are ready for a cross-country journey. As you take off and begin your ascent, you make a tiny, almost imperceptible adjustment to the plane's heading. You shift the nose of the aircraft by a mere 3.5 degrees to the south. To the passengers sitting in the back, nothing has changed. They are still watching their movies and drinking their ginger ale. To you, the pilot, the change is so small that it feels insignificant. It's a movement of just a few feet on the navigation screen. However, as the plane travels across the vast expanse of the United States, that tiny 3.5-degree deviation begins to compound. By the time you reach the East Coast, you are no longer heading for the bright lights of New York City. Instead, you find yourself descending toward the nation's capital, Washington, D.C. A shift of just a few feet at the start of the journey resulted in a destination hundreds of miles away from the original goal. This aviation metaphor is the perfect illustration of how habits function in our lives. We often ignore small changes because they don't seem to matter in the moment. If you are out of shape and you decide to go for a 20-minute jog today, you will still be out of shape when you return. If you eat a family-sized pepperoni pizza for dinner tonight, you won't wake up tomorrow morning with a noticeable weight gain. Because the immediate impact is negligible, we find it easy to let small bad habits slide and equally easy to let small good habits fall by the wayside. However, when we repeat these tiny behaviors day after day, they begin to compound, much like interest in a bank account. The difference between a 1% improvement and a 1% decline may seem non-existent on any given day, but over the course of a year, the gap becomes staggering. If you can get just 1% better at something every day for a year, you will end up 37 times better by the time the 12 months are up. Conversely, if you get 1% worse every day, you will decline almost down to zero. The challenge we face is that we live in a world that demands immediate results. When we don't see the scale moving or our bank account growing after a week of effort, we feel discouraged. We think, what's the point? And we revert to our old ways. But the truth is that your current results, your net worth, your weight, your level of knowledge, are all lagging measures of your habits. Your net worth is a lagging measure of your financial habits. Your weight is a lagging measure of your eating habits. Your knowledge is a lagging measure of your learning habits. You get what you repeat. If you find yourself struggling to see progress, the most important thing you can do is stop obsessing over your current results and start focusing on your current trajectory. It doesn't matter how much money you have in the bank right now. What matters is whether your habits are helping you save or spend. It doesn't matter how fit you are today. What matters is whether you are moving toward the gym or the couch. When you focus on the trajectory, you realize that time is the friend of good habits and the enemy of bad ones. If you are on a good trajectory, time will eventually deliver you to the right destination, just as that 3.5-degree shift will eventually land a plane in a completely different city. The key is to trust the system and understand that the most powerful results are often delayed. One of the most frustrating aspects of building new habits is what is often referred to as the valley of disappointment. This is the period where you are putting in the work, making the small changes and staying consistent, but you aren't seeing any visible results. It's like heating an ice cube in a room that is 25 degrees. You turn the heat up to 26, 27, 28, and nothing happens. The ice cube is still there, solid as ever. You hit 29, 30, 31. Still nothing. But then you hit 32 degrees. Suddenly the ice begins to melt. A 1-degree shift, no different from the ones before it, has unlocked a massive phase change. The work you did from 25 to 31 degrees wasn't wasted. It was being stored. This is the plateau of latent potential. In the early stages of any new habit, you are often performing what feels like silent work. You are building the foundation, even if the building isn't visible above the ground yet. This is why it is so crucial to focus on systems rather than goals. When you focus only on a goal, you create a yo-yo effect. Once you reach the goal, you stop doing the work that got you there. If a runner's only goal is to finish a marathon, they often stop training the day after the race. The goal was the finish line, and once it was crossed, the system collapsed. However, if the runner's system is to be a runner, then the marathon is just one milestone in a lifelong process. Furthermore, goals can actually decrease your happiness. When you have a goal, you are essentially saying, I'm not good enough yet, but I will be happy once I reach my goal. This puts your happiness in the future. A systems-first mentality, however, allows you to fall in love with the process. You can be happy every time your system is running. You don't have to wait for the result to feel successful. The success is found in the fact that you are the type of person who does the work. To survive the valley of disappointment, you must redefine what success looks like. Success is not the 50-pound weight loss. Success is the decision to put on your gym shoes. Success is not the published novel. Success is the daily habit of writing 200 words. When you shift your focus from the destination to the trajectory, you give yourself permission to stay the course even when the ice hasn't started to melt yet. You realize that the overnight success stories you hear about are actually the result of years of latent potential finally breaking through the surface. Every great achievement is the result of a series of small wins that finally reached a tipping point. By staying committed to your system, you ensure that you will eventually reach that 32-degree mark where everything changes. To understand how habits are built, we have to go back to the late 19th century and look at the work of a pioneering psychologist named Edward Thorndike. Thorndike was fascinated by how animals learn, and he designed a series of experiments involving cats in what he called puzzle boxes. The setup was simple but ingenious. Thorndike would place a hungry cat inside a wooden box that had a door that could be opened by a simple mechanism, usually a lever, a string, or a pedal. To make things even more motivating, he would place a piece of fish just outside the box where the cat could see and smell it. Initially, the cat's behavior was chaotic and random. It would pace back and forth, sniff at the corners, paw at the walls, and stick its nose through any available gap. It was a flurry of trial and error. Eventually, by sheer accident, the cat would bump into the lever or step on the pedal. The door would swing open, and the cat would escape to enjoy its reward. Thorndike then took that same cat and put it back in the box. He repeated this process dozens of times. What he observed was a fascinating transformation. As the trials continued, the cat's random movements began to disappear. It stopped sniffing the corners and pawing at the ceiling. Instead, it went straight for the lever. By the end of the experiment, some cats could escape the box in as little as 6 seconds, whereas their first attempt might have taken several minutes. From these observations, Thorndike formulated the law of effect. This law states that behaviors followed by satisfying consequences tend to be repeated, while behaviors followed by unpleasant consequences are less likely to be repeated. The cats weren't thinking about the lever. They had simply formed a neural association between the stimulus of the box and the response of pressing the lever, because that response led to the reward of freedom and fish. This is exactly how human habits work. A habit is simply a behavior that has been repeated enough times to become automatic. It is a mental shortcut that your brain uses to solve a problem. When you encounter a situation, the cue, your brain searches its database for a response that has worked in the past. If it finds one that led to a satisfying reward, it executes that behavior without you having to think about it. This process is a form of cognitive economy. If you had to think about every single action you took during the day, how to brush your teeth, how to tie your shoes, how to start your car, you would be mentally exhausted by breakfast. Habits allow our conscious minds to focus on new challenges while our subconscious handles the routine tasks. The cats in the box showed us that learning is a process of filtering out what doesn't work and doubling down on what does. Every habit you have today, from the way you check your phone to the way you respond to stress, is a solution to a problem your brain has encountered before. By understanding this, we can begin to see that we aren't lazy or weak-willed. We are simply operating on a set of learned responses that can be reprogrammed. While Edward Thorndike gave us the foundation of habit learning, modern science has refined our understanding into a 4-step model known as the habit loop. Every single habit you have, whether it's a good one like exercising or a bad one like biting your nails, follows these 4 distinct stages: cue, craving, response, and reward. The first step is the cue. The cue is a trigger that tells your brain to initiate a behavior. It is a piece of information that predicts a reward. Our prehistoric ancestors were attuned to cues that signaled primary rewards like food, water, and sex. Today, we are more often triggered by secondary rewards like money, fame, power, or even just the ding of a notification. The cue is about noticing the opportunity for a change in your state. For example, walking into a dark room is a cue that you need to see. The second step is the craving asterisk. The craving is the motivational force behind every habit. Without some level of desire, we have no reason to act. What you crave is not the habit itself, but the change in state it delivers. You don't crave smoking a cigarette. You crave the feeling of relief it provides. You don't crave brushing your teeth. You crave the feeling of a clean mouth. Every craving is linked to a desire to change your internal environment. If the cue is the noticing, the craving is the wanting. The third step is the asterisk response asterisk. This is the actual habit you perform, the thought or the action. Whether a response actually occurs depends on how motivated you are and how much friction is associated with the behavior. If a particular action requires more physical or mental effort than you are willing to expend, then you won't do it. The response is the doing. The fourth and final step is the asterisk asterisk reward asterisk asterisk. This is the end goal of every habit. The reward serves two purposes. First, it satisfies your craving. In the moment, the reward provides the relief or the pleasure you are seeking. Second, and more importantly, the reward teaches your brain which actions are worth remembering in the future. Your brain is a reward detector. As you go through life, your sensory nervous system is constantly monitoring which actions lead to pleasure or the removal of pain. The reward closes the loop and reinforces the entire cycle. Let's look at a common example, your morning coffee. 1 cue, you wake up and walk into the kitchen. 2 craving, you feel groggy and want to feel alert and focused. 3 response, you grind the beans, boil the water, and brew a cup of coffee. 4 reward, you take a sip and the caffeine enters your system, making you feel awake. Because the reward was satisfying, your brain notes that walking into the kitchen in the morning is a cue for making coffee. The next time you wake up, the loop triggers again, and over time, it becomes so automatic that you don't even remember making the decision to start the pot. By breaking habits down into these 4 components, we can identify exactly where a habit is failing or how to build a new one from scratch. We like to think that we are in total control of our choices, but the reality is that we are often products of our environment. Our behavior is heavily influenced by the cues that surround us. If you want to change your habits, one of the most effective things you can do is change your environment to make the cues for your good habits obvious and the cues for your bad habits invisible. To see this in action, we can look at a fascinating study conducted by Dr. Thorndike, no relation to Edward, a primary care physician at Massachusetts General Hospital in Boston. Dr. Thorndike wanted to improve the eating habits of hospital staff and visitors without using any willpower, tactics, or lectures on nutrition. She and her team decided to experiment with the hospital cafeteria's choice architecture. The cafeteria originally had refrigerators next to the cash registers filled primarily with soda. Dr. Thorndike's team added bottled water to these coolers and also placed baskets of bottled water throughout the room. They didn't remove the soda. They simply made the water more visible and accessible. Over the next 3 months, the results were staggering. Soda sales dropped by 11.4%, while bottled water sales increased by 25.8%. The people in the cafeteria didn't suddenly become more disciplined or health conscious. They simply responded to the cues in their environment. When water was easier to see, they drank more water. This is the power of making it obvious. Most of our daily cues are hidden. We don't realize that we check our phone because it's sitting right next to us on the desk, or that we eat cookies because they are sitting on the counter. If you want to learn the guitar, but your guitar is tucked away in its case in the back of a dark closet, the cue is invisible. You will rarely, if ever, feel the urge to practice. However, if you take that guitar out and place it on a stand in the middle of your living room, you have created a visual cue that is impossible to miss. You can use this principle to prime your environment for success. If you want to remember to take your vitamins, place the bottle right next to the faucet where you brush your teeth. If you want to drink more water, fill up 3 large bottles every morning and place them in the rooms where you spend the most time. The most successful people don't have more willpower than you. They just have better designed environments. They don't have to resist the temptation of the cookie jar because they don't keep a cookie jar on the counter. They don't have to try to work out because their gym bag is already packed and sitting by the front door. By taking control of your surroundings, you can make your good habits the path of least resistance. You are the architect of your own behavior, and your environment is the blueprint. One of the biggest obstacles to building new habits is vagueness. We tell ourselves, I'm going to start working out, or I'm going to eat healthier. These are noble goals, but they lack a clear plan of action. Without a specific time and place, our intentions often evaporate when life gets busy. This is where implementation intentions come into play. An implementation intention is a simple formula. I will add in. By filling in these blanks, you are making a clear commitment to your future self. Research has shown that people who use implementation intentions are 2 to 3 times more likely to stick to their habits than those who simply rely on motivation. For example, instead of saying, I'm going to meditate more, you say, I will meditate for 5 minutes at 7:00 a.m. in my living room. By defining the when and the where, you remove the need to make a decision in the moment. When 7:00 a.m. rolls around, you don't have to ask yourself if you feel like meditating, you just follow the plan. You have linked a specific cue, the time and place, to a specific response. Another powerful way to anchor a new habit is through habit stacking. This technique involves taking a habit you already have and stacking a new habit on top of it. Your brain already has strong neural pathways for your existing habits, like brushing your teeth, making coffee, or checking your mail. You can hijack these pathways to introduce something new. The formula for habit stacking is, after I will, for example, after I pour my morning cup of coffee, I will meditate for 1 minute. After I take off my work shoes, I will immediately change into my workout clothes. After I sit down to dinner, I will say one thing I am grateful for that happened today. The beauty of habit stacking is that the cue is already built into your day. You don't have to wait for a specific time or look for a visual reminder. The completion of one behavior naturally triggers the start of the next. It creates a momentum that carries you through your routine. By being precise about your intentions and leveraging your existing patterns, you can build a stable structure of habits that feels effortless rather than forced. To understand why some habits are so hard to break and others are so hard to start, we have to look at the neuroscience of desire. At the center of this story is a neurotransmitter called dopamine. For a long time, scientists thought dopamine was only about pleasure, but we now know it plays a much more complex role. It is the chemical of asterisk anticipation. In 1954, neuroscientists James Olds and Peter Milner conducted a famous and somewhat tragic experiment with rats. They implanted electrodes into the brains of rats that allowed them to block the release of dopamine. The results were startling. The rats didn't die immediately, but they lost all interest in life. They wouldn't eat, they wouldn't drink, and they wouldn't mate. Even when food was placed directly in their mouths, they wouldn't chew. They simply sat there, devoid of any motivation, until they died of thirst. This study proved that dopamine is the engine of desire. It is what makes us want to get out of bed and do things. But here is the fascinating part. Your brain releases more dopamine when you asterisk anticipate a reward than when you actually receive asterisk it. When you see a notification on your phone, your dopamine levels spike in anticipation of the message. By the time you actually read the text, the dopamine level has already begun to drop. The wanting system in the brain is much larger and more powerful than the liking system. This is why we can spend hours scrolling through social media even when we aren't actually enjoying it. Our brains are hooked on the anticipation of the next interesting post. We can use this knowledge to our advantage through a technique called temptation bundling. This involves linking an action you asterisk need asterisk to do with an action you asterisk want to do. By bundling a low dopamine task, like studying, with a high dopamine task, like listening to your favorite podcast, you make the necessary task more attractive. Consider the story of Ronan Byan, an Irish engineering student who knew he needed to exercise more but found it incredibly boring. What he did enjoy was watching Netflix. Ronan used his engineering skills to hack a stationary bike and connect it to his laptop. He wrote a computer program that would only allow Netflix to play if he was pedaling at a certain speed. If he slowed down, the show would pause. Ronan had successfully bundled his need, exercise, with his want, Netflix. By doing so, he transformed a chore into a pleasurable experience. You don't have to be an engineer to do this. You can tell yourself that you only get to listen to your favorite audiobook while you are cleaning the house, or that you only get to check sports scores after you've made your 5 sales calls for the day. By leveraging the brain's dopamine response, you can make even the most unattractive habits feel like something to look forward to. Human nature follows the law of least resistance. We are biologically wired to conserve energy. Evolutionarily speaking, energy was a precious resource, and our ancestors who were the most efficient at obtaining food and shelter were the ones who survived. This means that, given the choice between two similar options, we will naturally gravitate toward the one that requires the least amount of work. This is why making it easy is the third law of behavior change. If you want to build a good habit, you need to reduce the friction associated with it. Friction is anything that stands between you and the behavior. James Clear, the author of Atomic Habits, shares a story about his wife to illustrate this. James was always terrible at sending greeting cards. He would think about it, but the friction was too high. He'd have to go to the store, find a card, find a stamp, find the address, and then find a mailbox. His wife, however, never missed a birthday or an anniversary. Her secret wasn't more discipline, it was a greeting card box. She kept a box at home filled with cards for every occasion, birthdays, weddings, sympathies, all pre-sorted. When an occasion arose, the friction was almost zero. She just had to pull a card from the box and sign it. You can apply this friction reduction to almost any habit. Want to work out? Set out your gym clothes and shoes the night before. Want to eat healthier? Chop all your vegetables on Sunday so they are ready to grab during the week. Want to read more? Put a book on your pillow every morning so it's there when you go to bed. Conversely, if you want to break a bad habit, you should increase the friction. If you find yourself watching too much TV, unplug it after every use and put the batteries for the remote in a different room. If you check your phone too often, put it in a drawer in another part of the house. By making the bad habit just a little bit harder to do, you give your conscious mind enough time to intervene and say, "Do I really want to do this?" The goal is to create an environment where doing the right thing is as easy as possible. We often think we need to toughen up to succeed, but the real winners are the ones who make success the easiest possible path. Don't try to fight your biology. Work with it by smoothing the road to your good habits and putting roadblocks in front of your bad ones. Most people fail at new habits because they try to do too much too soon. They decide they want to start running, so they try to run 5 miles on the first day. They end up exhausted, sore, and discouraged, and they never do it again. The secret to starting a habit that sticks is the 2-minute rule. The 2-minute rule states, when you start a new habit, it should take less than 2 minutes to do. The idea is to make your habits as easy as possible to start. A new habit shouldn't feel like a challenge. The challenge comes later once the habit is established. Read 1 book a week becomes read 1 page. Do 30 minutes of yoga becomes get out my yoga mat. Study for the exam becomes open my notes. Run a marathon becomes put on my running shoes. Many people find this idea ridiculous. They think, what's the point of reading 1 page? That's not going to make me smarter. But they are missing the point. You have to standardize before you can optimize. You can't improve a habit that doesn't exist. If you can't master the basic habit of showing up, you'll never master the fine details of the craft. The 2-minute rule is about mastering the art of showing up. By making the habit incredibly easy, you remove the mental barrier of procrastination. Once you've put on your running shoes, you'll likely find that you're willing to go for a short walk. Once you've read 1 page, you'll probably read a few more. But even if you only read 1 page or only put on your shoes, you have still won. You have reinforced your identity as a reader or a runner. You have shown up. This is a gateway habit that leads you down a more productive path. Think of your habits as the entrance ramp to a highway. The ramp itself is short and easy, but it determines where you end up. If you can master the first 2 minutes of any behavior, you have mastered the most important part. Don't worry about the results in the beginning. Just worry about becoming the type of person who doesn't miss. We have looked at how to make habits obvious, attractive, and easy. But there is one final law that determines whether a habit will actually stick in the long run. Make it satisfying. The first three laws increase the odds that a behavior will be performed this time. The fourth law increases the odds that a behavior will be repeated next time. This is the cardinal rule of behavior change. What is immediately rewarded is repeated. What is immediately punished is avoided. To understand why this is so difficult for us, we have to look at the history of human evolution. For most of human history, we lived in an immediate return environment. If you were hungry, you hunted or gathered and you ate immediately. If a predator chased you, you ran and you survived immediately. Our brains evolved to prioritize immediate rewards because, in the wild, the future was uncertain. Today, however, we live in a delayed return environment. You go to work today, but you don't get paid until the end of the month. You go to the gym today, but you don't see muscle growth for weeks. You save for retirement today, but you won't see the benefit for decades. Our modern world is built on long-term rewards, but our brains are still wired for the immediate hit. This is why bad habits are so easy to form. The reward for smoking a cigarette is immediate stress relief, while the punishment, lung cancer, is delayed by 20 years. The reward for eating a donut is immediate sugar rush, while the punishment, weight gain, is delayed. With good habits, it's the opposite. The cost is in the present, but the reward is in the future. To make a good habit stick, you have to find a way to add a bit of immediate pleasure to it. You need to hack your brain's preference for the now. A great example of this is a couple who wanted to stop eating out and start cooking at home to save money and get healthy. These are delayed rewards. To give themselves an immediate win, they opened a savings account and labeled it Trip to Europe. Every time they resisted the urge to go to a restaurant and cooked at home instead, they transferred $50 into that account. The satisfaction of seeing that $50 hit the account and watching the Trip to Europe fund grow provided the immediate gratification they needed to stay on track. They weren't just not eating out, they were earning a vacation. By adding an immediate reward to a delayed return habit, you bridge the gap and keep your motivation alive until the long-term results start to show up. To see the impact of immediate satisfaction on a massive scale, we can look at the work of Stephen Luby, a public health researcher who worked in the slums of Karachi, Pakistan, in the late 1990s. Karachi was a place where basic sanitation was a major challenge. Diarrhea, pneumonia, and skin infections were rampant among children, leading to high mortality rates. Luby knew that the solution was simple: hand washing. If the residents washed their hands regularly with soap, the transmission of disease would plummet. The problem wasn't a lack of knowledge. The people of Karachi knew that hand washing was important. They had been told it many times by health officials, but they weren't doing it. It wasn't a habit. Luby decided to try a different approach. He partnered with Procter & Gamble to provide the neighborhood with a premium soap called Safeguard. This wasn't your average, cheap bar of soap. It was a high-quality product that lathered easily and smelled wonderful. It felt good on the skin. Suddenly, the experience of hand washing changed. It was no longer a chore that people should do for their health. It was a pleasurable sensory experience. Because the soap was so satisfying to use, the habit took hold almost overnight. The results were incredible. In the neighborhoods where the premium soap was distributed, diarrhea rates dropped by 52%. Pneumonia rates fell by 48%, and skin infections decreased by 35%. Years later, even after the free soap stopped being distributed, the habit remained. The people had associated hand washing with a positive, satisfying feeling. This story illustrates the fourth law of behavior change perfectly. When a behavior is satisfying, our brains want to repeat it. If you want to make a habit stick, you have to find your own version of the nice soap. How can you make your workout more enjoyable? How can you make your healthy meal taste better? How can you make your work task feel like a win? When you focus on making the experience itself satisfying, You don't have to rely on willpower to get things done. The pleasure of the activity becomes its own reward. One of the most effective ways to make a habit satisfying is to make your progress visible. This is where habit tracking comes in. A habit tracker is a simple way to measure whether you did a habit. The most basic version is a calendar where you cross off each day that you stick to your routine. The power of habit tracking is threefold. First, it makes the habit obvious. Looking at your tracker reminds you to act. Second, it makes the habit attractive. There is a certain beauty in a long string of X's on a calendar. You don't want to break the chain. Third, it makes the habit satisfying. Crossing off a day provides an immediate hit of gratification. It is a visual proof that you are becoming the person you want to be. One of the most famous proponents of habit tracking was Benjamin Franklin. Starting at the age of 20, Franklin carried a small notebook where he tracked his adherence to 13 virtues, such as temperance, silence, and industry. Every evening, he would open his book and record whether he had lived up to those virtues that day. He did this for decades. Franklin didn't expect to be perfect, but the act of tracking kept his goals front and center and allowed him to see his gradual improvement over time. You can use a habit tracker for almost anything. Did I write today? Did I take my vitamins? Did I get 8 hours of sleep? Did I avoid social media until noon? The key is to keep it simple. Don't try to track 20 things at once. Start with 1 or 2. And remember the never miss twice rule. Everyone misses a day. Eventually life happens. You might get sick or you might have a family emergency. Missing 1 day is an accident. Missing 2 days is the start of a new habit. When you miss a day, your goal should be to get back on track as quickly as possible. Don't let a single failure spiral into a total collapse. By using a habit tracker, you create a visual record of your commitment, and that record becomes a powerful motivator to keep going, even when you don't feel like it. It turns the invisible work of habit building into a tangible, satisfying win. We are social animals. For most of human history, being part of a tribe was essential for survival. If you were kicked out of the tribe, you were as good as dead. Because of this, we are deeply wired to care about what others think of us. We want to be liked, respected, and accepted. We can use this social pressure to help us stick to our habits through a habit contract. A habit contract is a formal agreement where you commit to specific behavior and define the penalties for failing to follow through. To make it truly effective, you need an accountability partner, someone who will watch your progress and hold you to the terms of the contract. Consider the story of Brian Harris, an entrepreneur from Nashville. Brian wanted to lose weight and get down to 200 pounds. He knew he needed a system, so he created a habit contract. He signed the document, and he had his wife and his personal trainer sign it as witnesses. The contract was specific. He committed to tracking his food every day and weighing himself every day. But the real power was in the penalties. If he failed to track his food, he had to pay his trainer $100. If he failed to weigh himself, he owed his wife $500. Brian wasn't just motivated by the money. He was motivated by the fear of looking bad in front of the people he cared about. He didn't want to admit to his wife that he had failed. The social cost of breaking the contract was higher than the effort required to stick to the habit. You can create your own habit contract for any goal. It doesn't have to involve large sums of money, though that certainly helps. It could be as simple as telling a friend, "If I don't go to the gym 3 times this week, I'll buy you lunch next Sunday." The key is to make the consequences of your bad habits immediate and painful. Bad habits usually have immediate rewards and delayed costs. A habit contract flips that script. It makes the cost of the bad habit, or the failure of the good habit, immediate and public. When someone is watching, we are much more likely to be our best selves. By leveraging our social nature, we can create a safety net that catches us when our willpower fails. Once you have established your habits, the next challenge is maintaining them over the long haul. How do you keep from getting bored? How do you keep improving? The answer lies in the Goldilocks rule. The Goldilocks rule states that humans experience peak motivation when working on tasks that are just right, Not too hard and not too easy. If you try to play a game of tennis against a 4-year-old, you will get bored almost immediately. There is no challenge and the result is certain. If you try to play a game of tennis against Roger Federer, you will get discouraged almost immediately. The challenge is too great and you have no hope of winning. However, if you play against someone who is exactly at your skill level, you will be completely engaged. You win some points, you lose some points, and the outcome is uncertain. This is the flow state, where time seems to disappear and you are fully immersed in the task. To keep your habits alive, you need to continually find ways to challenge yourself just enough to stay engaged, but not so much that you want to quit. This is the difference between standardization and optimization. In the beginning, your goal is just to show up the 2-minute rule. But once you have mastered the art of showing up, you need to start making small improvements. If you've been running 2 miles easily for a month, try running 2.1 miles. If you've been meditating for 5 minutes, try 6. This constant, incremental improvement keeps the habit from becoming mindless. It keeps you in the Goldilocks zone. Boredom is the greatest threat to a long-term habit. We often think that failure comes from a lack of willpower, but more often it comes from a lack of interest. When a habit becomes too routine, we stop paying attention. By constantly searching for that 1% improvement, you keep the atomic nature of your habits alive and ensure that you are always moving toward your full potential. As we conclude this exploration of atomic habits, it is important to remember that the journey of self-improvement is not a destination, but a continuous process. We have looked at the power of the 3.5-degree shift, the mechanics of the habit loop, and the importance of environmental design. We have seen how tiny 1% improvements can compound into life-changing results, and how the 2-minute rule can help us overcome the paralysis of starting. The most profound insight you can take away from this is that you do not rise to the level of your goals, you fall to the level of your systems. Your life today is a reflection of the systems you have been running for the past few years. If you want a different life, you don't need to set a different goal. You need to build a different system. This requires a shift in identity. True behavior change is not about doing something different. It's about becoming someone different. Every action you take is a vote for the type of person you want to become. When you go to the gym, you are casting a vote for being a healthy person. When you write a page, you are casting a vote for being a writer. You don't need to be perfect. You just need to win the majority of the votes. As you move forward, I encourage you to start small. Find one tiny habit you can implement today, something that takes less than 2 minutes. Design your environment to make it obvious. Link it to an existing habit through habit stacking. Find a way to make it immediately satisfying. And if you fall off the wagon, remember the rule: never miss twice. The power of atomic habits lies in their simplicity. You don't need a revolution. You just need a series of small, consistent wins. Over time, these tiny changes will weave themselves into the fabric of your life, creating a tapestry of success that was once unimaginable. Trust the process, embrace the 1%, and watch as the world opens up to you, one small habit at a time. For more book summaries for free, install Zyroverse.